that. And there's also a double standard element of it, because there's a lot of really, really loud right-wingers who are saying the left is being propped up on social media and the right is being suppressed, to put it very simply.
What's happening, everybody? Today I've got some classic Pakman for you. David Pakman was interviewed by Joe Rogan on his show, The Joe Rogan Experience. David Pakman and Joe Rogan discuss free speech, social media, and whether or not social media platforms should regulate speech. With that, let's watch Joe Rogan give David Pakman's dumbass a crash course on the First Amendment. Let's go.
We had this conversation about like, okay, if a platform gets to a certain size, does it not kind of enter some new space where you need someone to establish some guidelines?
Can I pause you real quick? One of the problems with this argument, though, is that particularly like those doctors in Bakersfield, they weren't spreading disinformation. They were basically spreading the actual facts of fatalities and age groups, and they just had a different perspective.
Different interpretation.
Well, not even the different interpretation, because they're basically just going over the statistics, but they had a different viewpoint of how they should move forward. And they were also discussing things like furloughed doctors and nurses because hospitals are no longer doing elective surgeries, and then many hospitals are on the verge of bankruptcy, which apparently is true.
Yeah.
The problem is that's not disinformation. And so if you're saying that if giving people disinformation makes them make poor choices and they could be putting themselves at risk or putting loved ones at risk because of that, yes. Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
But this isn't disinformation. This is actual information. It's just information with a different perspective other than what we're getting, which is only one point of view from the World Health Organization and people who subscribe to those ideas. So it's not a lie, but I think your point of if someone believes in the flat earth, there's no harm in that. That's true. So
right when I got out of college, I worked for a pharmaceutical company in sales, but I didn't know how to talk to adults, much less doctors, So I put this affect onto my voice to sound like what I thought an adult sounded like. Of course, I grew up and grew out of that stage after about a month or two on the job. But I feel like David Pakman has never moved out of that phase. I don't think he's covering up immaturity like I was. I think he's covering up something else. Like, I've only got two guesses. One is stupidity. And the second is that he's an alien. I mean, one of those is really far-fetched because I don't think he's all that stupid, truthfully. I hate to say that. So, make of that what you will.
Really on the same line.
Yeah, I totally agree that these are not all equivalent situations.
Yeah.
For the purposes of, our conversation about like what regulation should be in place.
Right.
Who gets to regulate or this sort of thing. The point that I had made last time we talked about this was not necessarily that I'm in favor or against having some kind of infrastructure that says, here's how a social network has to operate, YouTube, Twitter, whatever. We could talk about that, and I'm glad to. My argument last time we talked was, I don't know what the legal case is. How do you define legally what it is that is supposed to happen? Is it like, what would be the legal framework for that? And there's also a double standard element of it, because there's a lot of really, really loud right-wingers who are saying the left is being propped up on social media and the right is being suppressed, to put it very simply.
Right.
And they're calling for regulation. They're against new regulation on gun safety. They're against business regulation. They're against stay-at-home order, et cetera. Now they want to regulate tweets. Like, that's where now they want regulation. That seems extremely cynical and hypocritical to me. But we don't even necessarily have to dig into that to think about, like, okay, if we regulate it, how do we regulate it? Who gets to decide?
Well, David, I think we're dealing with a thing that's very similar to what we talked about earlier. The founding fathers who set up this country in the 1700s had no idea.
Hey, if you like watching videos like these, like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. let's get back to the video.
What 2020 was going to be like. And I think when you're talking about freedom of speech, it's like, do you still have freedom of speech if you could just talk and you can't tweet? Well, I guess you do, right? Do you still have freedom to get the word out? Well, you do, but you don't have freedom like you or I do, where you could tweet or you could make a YouTube video. And who gets to have that? And is that an essential service? Is that a thing like the post office or a thing like the electricity and the utilities? Is it an essential thing? I think one could make the argument that in 2020, it's used by so many people to convey so much information, and it's so significant that I believe it is an essential thing. And I think that just banning someone because you don't like what they say or you don't like how they say it, I don't think that's a solution, nor do I think there's a clear solution. Because I think that if you have someone who is hateful and is doxing people and insulting people and stalking people online and saying horrible things, that's not good either, right? There's laws about that in person. You can't harass people in person. Why can you harass people online? Why can you put up your address and have a bunch of people send terrible things to your house? Well, why is that okay? Well, it shouldn't be okay either. We need to figure out what's okay and what's not okay. And I think one of the problems with isolating, like if I think tech people and people that, whether it's Google or Apple, and you've made a really good argument that they may appear left socially, but they absolutely operate right.
David, when Dr. Malone, Dr. McCullough, Dr. Bhattacharya, Scott Atlas, and the list goes on, when they were suppressed during the pandemic, that wasn't a different interpretation. They're experts. They were giving their expert opinion and the truth. So that's not a different interpretation. I like how you try to spin it there, though. By the way, maybe it's just because I've been doing a lot of David Pakman videos lately. As much as I can't stand Destiny, for douchebag of the year, I mean, we're coming down to the wire here. I think it's Pakman. I'm just going to automatically pare the bracket down to Pakman or Destiny. So let me know in the comments who's the bigger douche, Pakman or Destiny, and I will. I'll even put a little survey, or what do you call them? Yeah, survey out online, and you guys can vote on it, and I'll tally up the votes, and we'll do something nice like a ceremony or something. My channel's new, so you know it won't probably be as impactful, but it will be the inaugural member of Douchebag of the Year, and I'll do something nice like a plaque or you know, honor them somehow. So when Dip brought up, the one problem is that there are a lot of right-wingers that think the right wing is suppressed and the left is being propped up. Very loud right-wingers. That part of the conversation had nothing to do with what they were talking about at all. Because immediately after he says that, he says, we don't have to dig into that, and then goes back into actually what they were talking about. He only brought that up because his soul or single role on this planet is to spew out stupid talking points. Now, this is an older interview, so for all of you that get in there and go, this interview is like 8 years old. Fine, I got you. But this is an older interview. How do you think David Pakman's take there aged with what we know from the Twitter files, with what we know about Mark Zuckerberg acknowledging that the Biden administration asked them to suppress, you know, right-wing stories. And during that little talking point tirade, David also said, well, I mean, the right doesn't want, well, that's not his voice, sorry. Well, I mean, the right doesn't want regulation on this or this, but tweets is where you want to do regulation? No, stupid. We don't want regulation. They were suppressing right-wing voices for a very, very long time. That's their regulation. inside a government subsidized private company that was skewing the narrative. This is a fact now. This isn't conspiracy theory, another conspiracy theory that just happened to be true. We want them to cut that out. All we ask of these kind of, I hate the term because everyone uses it, but if X or Twitter is the town hall, just a fair playing field. And a fair playing field includes all speech, even speech you don't like. And I appreciate the conversation they're having, actually. It's a good conversation, but to me, I can simplify it. All speech is acceptable. The nastiest speech to the most inspiring, hopeful, optimistic speech. Where the line is drawn is just like where it's drawn with the First Amendment. When you create a call to action to actually harm another individual. So doxing, cyber stalking, you don't dox someone because you want people to send that person candygrams. You want to dox someone so you can really make their life miserable, or on the worst end of it, so someone will go out and harm that person. So that to me is the same as a call to action. But all other speech, we have to let it be heard, because those who say things that truly are vile and evil, they will be called out. Just because there's free speech doesn't mean there's not consequences to your speech. Does that make sense? But what did you guys think about this quote unquote debate or conversation between Joe Rogan and David Pakman? And also, what are your thoughts on free speech? I gave my interpretation. Do you agree with it? Am I off a little bit? Am I completely off? Please let me know in the comments. And then also 2 more questions that are probably the most important. 1, is David stupid or an alien, or is there another reason he has this ridiculous, over-articulated, pretending to think deeply affect on his voice? And the second question is, douchebag of the year, Destiny or David Pakman? They're the finalists. I've decided. But anyway, that's it for this video. If you like watching retards like David Pakman or Destiny or other idiots just spout the same talking points over and over and over, then click on one of the 2 videos that just popped up on the screen. Otherwise, as always, I really appreciate you being here. We're really getting close to New Year's Eve, and I can't wait to enjoy a really awesome 2025 with all of you. So thank you for everything that you have done for me this year. The end.